Dear student, today we will discuss endocrine system, that is the chemical coordination and integration. Now, nervous system and endocrine system, both system control and coordinate different parts of the body and maintain the homeostasis during rest and exercise by integrating physiological processes. Now, endocrine system provide feedback to nervous system for neural processing, and the endocrine system works through two things, that is, one is endocrine gland, and another one are hormones. Let's discuss the gland. Gland refer to the group of cells in animal's body synthesizing substances such as hormones. Main glands are pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal, pancreas, gonads. Liver is said to be the largest gland, whereas the pineal gland, which is present in the brain, is the smallest gland. And these glands, depending on the features, are termed as exocrine, endocrine, and heterocrine. Now, exocrine glands are the glands with the duct, and they pour their secretion in the body cavities through this duct, and mainly they secrete the enzyme. Endocrine, they are ductless gland, and they directly pour their secretion in the blood, and they secrete hormones. Secretion means that the particular cell, it produces a particular chemical or that thing, and then it discharges that out of the cell. So this process of producing and discharging is called secretion. Heterocrine, the gland consists of both exocrine and endocrine. Now we will discuss the hormones, which are also known as information molecules or chemical messengers. They are the chemicals produced by endocrine glands and acts as intercellular message, and their final action is on the target organ, where they alter the activity in the target organ. So we will see how they are working. Now, they are called information molecule as they are secreted in response to change in the external or internal environment of the body. Hormones are produced in a very small quantities, but they are highly specific in their action. Means particular hormone has a specific function, so that hormone will catalyze that function only. They are destroyed immediately after their action is over. So they don't remain in the body, they secreted and they do their action on the target organ, and after that they are destroyed. What is the mechanism of action of the hormone? So basically they influence the synthesis, activation, or inhibition of certain metabolic processes in the body. Now, metabolic processes are the various biochemical processes that are taking place in the body, and these biochemical processes are all catalyzed by the enzyme. So these processes such as synthesis of protein, formation of energy, formation of glycogen, breakdown of glucose, all these are metabolic processes. Okay. Now, these hormones, if based on the nature, they are categorized into main two categories, that is peptide and steroid. Peptide means they have some protein components such as amino acid, they may be protein, they may be polypeptide, okay, and they may be glycoprotein. And steroids, they have a steroid structure and maybe prostaglandins. So we'll be discussing this structure part in the chapter biomolecules. Right now we'll be just discussing steroid and peptide hormone, how they are carrying out their mechanism of action. So steroid hormone, they are lipid soluble. You know that cell membrane is made up of bilipid layer. They are lipid soluble, so they can directly enter the cell, okay, because they are lipid soluble and membrane is made up of bilipid layer, so there is no problem. So what they do, they enter in the cell. Inside the cell they bind to the whatever intracellular receptor, okay, and form hormone receptor complex. Okay, now once this complex is formed, it further activates the DNA, or you can say it further activate the gene on DNA. This receptor bind to the transcription factor, is a specific factor that activates the gene, and finally what will happen, the specific type of proteins are synthesized. Okay, and these proteins can be enzymes, and enzymes, they regulate different types of metabolic processes. Now look at the peptide hormone. They are insoluble in lipid. Okay, so they cannot directly enter. So what they do, they bind on the surface of the cell. Okay, and further they transform, or they transmit their signals. Whatever these hormones are called as signaling molecules. So what they do, they bind on the cell surface and they transfer their signal inside the cell by cascade mechanism. This is called signal transduction. I will be discussing next what is this. And finally the result of this is the enzyme or protein is activated and it will be altering the metabolism. So this is how they work. Steroid hormones bring about the synthesis of new enzyme. So that is the specific property, whereas the peptide, they activate the existing enzyme. The action is slow in case of steroid, whereas the action is fast in case of peptide. So these are some point of differences between two. Now we will see that these peptide hormone, how they work through signal transduction. So I'll be briefly discussing. Signal transduction is actually the process by which chemical, electrical or physical signal is transmitted from exterior to interior of the cell through series of molecules. So here we are specifically discussing the chemical molecule, that is hormones, and hormones here in this pathway are called as primary messengers. They are the signal molecules or chemical messengers, but here they are known as primary messengers. So basically three stages are there: reception, transduction and response. In the reception, the primary messenger bind to the receptor on the cell surface. So where it bind to this receptor is nothing but it is a transmembrane protein which is present on the cell surface. Transduction is the cascade of biochemical reaction that occurs, and response, the cell response means what is the final response that is shown by the cell. So it may be by activation or inhibition of enzyme, activation or inhibition of metabolic processes, or gene expression. So let's discuss the pathway here. The hormone bind to the receptor on the cell surface and form hormone receptor complex. After receiving the message, the receptor will undergo conformational change. Okay, so this receptor is binding with the hormone, and now this hormone introduces certain change in the receptor. Now these changes further activate the enzyme adenyl cyclase, which is just situated near the membrane. This enzyme catalyzes the reaction, converts the ATP to cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP is known as 3-5-adenosine monophosphate, and this cyclic AMP is known as secondary messenger, because now from the outside the message has come to inside, and this first message is received by cyclic AMP, so it is called secondary messenger or intracellular hormonal mediator. Now cyclic AMP serve as secondary messenger and further deliver the outside message to inside of cell, and this is called amplification of message. Cyclic AMP along with calcium activate series of biochemical reaction, that is cascade, such as phosphorylation of protein. Phosphorylation of protein, this bring about the gene expression, or you can say activation of DNA, and they form the specific proteins, and specific proteins carry out the cellular response. Now cyclic AMP which is a secondary messenger. It has a very short lifespan. Once it do its work, it get degraded by the enzyme phosphodiesterase. So this is in very brief the signal transduction, that how the peptide hormones are working. Now we will be discussing system of hormones. So basically the hormones are categorized in 3 different categories: releasing hormones or inhibitory hormones, tropic hormones, and target organ hormones. Releasing and inhibitory hormones are produced by hypothalamus. Just to recall, hypothalamus is a part of forebrain diencephalon, and it is just located near thalamus, and below that pituitary gland is situated, and pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus by infundibulum. That is what we have discussed in last chapter. So here the hypothalamus, which consists of certain neurosecretory cells, they produces the releasing and inhibitory hormones. Then tropic hormones are the one which are produced by pituitary gland, which is known as master gland, and it controls the activity of other glands. Target hormones are the one which are produced by different glands which are located at different parts of the body, and they finally act on the target organ. So hypothalamus and pituitary are important control center of the body that coordinate and integrate various systems and physiological processes. Now hypothalamus, the releasing hormone, stimulates secretion of tropic hormone from the pituitary, whereas the inhibitory hormone inhibit the secretion from pituitary. So this is part of hormonal regulation. We will see this. Now hypothalamus secretes what type of hormone? Releasing hormone. So these are all releasing hormone: thyroid stimulating releasing hormone, adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone, follicle stimulating releasing hormone, luteinizing releasing hormone, prolactin releasing hormone, melanocyte stimulating hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone. Okay, now all these hormones are actually they are released from hypothalamus, and they act on pituitary, which is also known as hypophysis. Now this pituitary has 3 different lobes: anterior lobe, posterior lobe, and intermediate lobe. Anterior lobe also known as adenophysis, posterior lobe also known as neurohypophysis. Now all these hormones which are released by the hypothalamus, they act on the anterior lobe of the pituitary, and this act on the pituitary, and from the pituitary the anterior lobe of the pituitary further secrete these hormones. They are known as tropic hormones, that is thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenal corticotropin hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, interstitial cell stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin hormone. So these are different tropic hormones which are released by anterior pituitary. Okay, so other tropic hormones now which are released by posterior lobe of the pituitary are vasopressin and oxytocin. Now these hormones are actually produced by hypothalamus, but they are released through the posterior lobe of the pituitary. Now if you see further, these hormone act on different glands. Okay, so thyroid gland, they have different glands, so they act on their gland, and further these gland releases hormone. So we'll be discussing this part next. So gland and target organ of anterior pituitary. So TSH act on thyroid. Okay, thyroid gland, which is located in neck, and releases the hormones called thyroxine hormone, and these thyroxine hormone further act on the target, you can say, cells or organs. Adrenal cortex is the gland where ACTH act on the adrenal cortex, and they releases corticoid hormones, mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoid, and they also act on further target organs. Similarly, gonads and others. Okay, you can see. Now here what is important is that some of the hormone which act on these glands, okay, and the glands further secretes the hormones. Now some of the glands they directly do the action, okay, because whatever hormone is synthesized, they directly act. For example, let's discuss here FSH. So FSH is follicle stimulating hormone, which is produced by pituitary, but it has an action on gonads. So it controls like spermatogenesis, so it acts on the testis and it acts on the you can say Graafian follicle, and it controls the oogenesis. Okay, so they have a direct action. Okay, whereas if you see the luteinizing hormone, okay, so these act on the gonads and gonads further secrete the hormones. Okay, in case of FSH is directly acting on these gonads and doing the function, whereas in case of LH, the LH acts on the gonads, and gonads further what they do, they secrete the hormone testosterone, which is secreted by seminiferous tubules, and progesterone, which is secreted by corpus luteum. Okay, so their further action is on the target organ. So these hormones act on the target organ, testosterone and progesterone. So here some of them are directly acting, and some of them they stimulate further production of the hormone, and these hormone further act on the target organ. So this is how different hormone functions. Similarly, intermediate lobe, MSH, so melanocyte in skin, direct action. Posterior pituitary secrete two hormone, that is oxytocin and vasopressin, which is also known as ADH, that is antidiuretic hormone. We have already discussed in the excretory system the function of ADH directly on kidney, where it maintains the osmoregulation. Okay, so they have direct action. Oxytocin directly act on uterus and mammary gland during the childbirth. Okay, so we'll continue with hormonal regulation in next part 2. Thank you.